In today's session, we would be discussing the preparation of secondary distribution summary. So a quick recap of what we have done so far. We've learned how to prepare the primary distribution summary. We saw that based on the overhead expenses that are collated by the cost accounting department, these information gets shared, and then what happens is the overheads, it gets distributed between the various departments of the organization, and then based on that you will go about preparing the overhead summary. So the first step is preparation of the primary overhead distribution summary. Now further to that, we would be learning the preparation of secondary distribution summary. So in that note, let us have a discussion in this session. Why does a business need secondary distribution summary, and how does a business go about preparing secondary distribution summary? So now that we are talking about secondary distribution summary, one important aspect that you have to remember is departments of a business are broadly classified into two. You have production department, then you have service department. So I'll repeat that once again. The departments of any business, it is broadly classified into two. You have production department, and then you have the service department. Now, there is a difference between the functioning of production as well as service department, because production department, they are predominantly involved in the direct activities. So in other words, these are revenue generating departments of the organization. So I'll repeat that. Production departments, these are revenue generating departments of the organization. So we are preparing the distribution summary to distribute the overhead between the production as well as between the service. So one important aspect that you have to remember over here is that whenever we talk about overheads, overheads are indirect expenses. Okay? Overheads are indirect expenses. Now, these are expenses, which means as a part of these expenses, there's an outflow of money. Someone has to foot that bill. Someone, end of the day, has to pay for that overhead expense. Now, the question is, who will pay for it? So here, when we talk about the departments of a business, we are classifying them into production and service, because it is only the production department who has the capability to absorb the overhead. Service departments do not have the capability to absorb the overhead. Why is that so? Because production departments are the ones who are involved in the production process. They are the ones who are in the front line. They are the ones who are in the process of manufacturing. So since the production departments are in the process of rendering a service or carrying out a manufacturing activity, they have the capability to absorb the overheads. As a part of the revenue that is generated by them, they are in the option, or they are in the they have the capability to absorb the overheads. So we will talk about a project. Okay, so whenever we talk about a project, you will have the analyst, and then you will have a manager. So if you think from a revenue perspective, it is the analysts who are generating revenue, because whatever tasks that are assigned to them, they are the ones who are carrying out the activity at the grassroots level, and based on the activity that is performed by the analyst, the payments would be carried out. But at the same time, you may have a designation of a manager to supervise the analyst. Now, why do you have manager? Because if the manager is not there, then the functioning of these analysts may not happen in an efficient and in a smooth way. So the remuneration that is paid to the manager, okay, the remuneration that gets paid to the manager, that is actually the manager is not directly involved in the production process. However, he still has to be paid a compensation. He still has to be paid a monetary benefit in the form of salary. So the salary that you pay for the manager is technically an overhead fee. So in that case, who would foot the bill? So again, that remuneration that has to be paid to the manager, it in turn has to be passed on to the revenue that is generated by the analyst. So that's the reason why we have this classification. We have this classification of production and then service. So whenever we pick up on certain large organizations, it can so happen that not all the departments in the organization would be revenue generating. We can pick up some examples. Let's say you pick up on an organization like Reliance. Okay, so Reliance, they may have an operational department. So the actual revenue may be generated by the operational department. But along with that, you may have a marketing department, you may have a finance department, you may have an HR department. These departments are not responsible for revenue generation. Okay, they are not responsible for revenue generation. But if you do not have a finance department, who will take care of the finance activities? Who will take care of maintaining journals, ledgers, preparing cash flow, fund flow statements, preparing the balance sheet, all that? Who would carry out? So finance is a service department. Let's talk about HR. HR is responsible for taking the welfare of the employees. So if you do not have an HR department, then who will take care of the welfare of your employees? Who will be responsible for the grievance addressal? Who will be responsible for the training aids? Who will be responsible for carrying out and ensuring that they are having a smooth and a satisfactory work environment? So HR department would be a service department. So whenever we talk about any business, what you have to remember is that the departments of the business can be broadly classified into production as well as service. So production departments, they are responsible for rendering services, whereas service departments, they are responsible for supporting the production department. So the cost that is incurred by the service department, since service departments are not revenue generating, they do not have a feasibility, they do not have a possibility to foot the bill all by themselves. Okay, so now let's talk about the distribution summaries that we're preparing for overhead. So when we prepare primary distribution summary, we're dividing the overheads among the various departments, among all the departments in an organization. So the departments could be service in nature, they could be production in nature. So I'll repeat that. When we prepare the primary distribution summary of an organization, we're preparing we are picking up all the overhead costs, and we are distributing these overhead costs between production as well as service departments. Then we prepare what is called as the secondary distribution summary. Now, why do we prepare secondary distribution summary? Secondary distribution summary is prepared to reapportion the service department's cost to the production departments. Okay, so what would happen is when you prepare the primary distribution summary, the overhead is now divided among the different departments. Here, the division is immaterial of what type of department you are. Whether you're production, whether you're service, you will have to take up a portion of the cost. Once that division is done, then you have to remember the overhead share that is given to the production departments, they have the capability to absorb it. Why? Because they are revenue generating nature. Since they are generating revenue, they have the feasibility, they have the capability to absorb. While the secondary distribution summary is prepared, whatever overhead share is given to the service department, that gets reapportioned to the production department again. It will get reapportioned again to the production department. Now, why is this done? Because service departments do not have the capability to absorb the overheads. They are not revenue generating in nature, so they do not have the bandwidth, they do not have the revenue to absorb whatever overhead share is assigned to them. So this is the reason why we would be preparing the secondary distribution summary. Secondary distribution summary is prepared to reapportion the share of overhead that is assigned to the service departments back to the production department. Why is it coming back to the production department? It is coming back to the production department because production departments are the ones who are generating revenue. Okay? They are the ones who are generating revenue. Moving forward, we will be talking about a little bit more about secondary distribution summary. So with secondary distribution summary, what happens is the service department overhead costs are then passed on again to the production department. Okay, so we are trying to channelize whatever overhead share that has been assigned to the service departments, it gets redistributed back to the production department. Okay, so all the overheads that have hit the service department, it gets passed back to the cost unit. Okay, you're channelizing all that back to the cost unit. So in a nutshell, The bottom line of preparing primary as well as secondary distribution summary is to pass on, is to charge back all the overheads back to the production department. Okay? The reason why we would do this is because we want to channelize all the overheads that we have incurred back to the production department. Okay? That's the reason why we would go about with the preparation of the secondary distribution summary. So secondary distribution summary is prepared in order to charge back all the overheads back to the production department. So that's the reason why we would be preparing the secondary distribution summary. Now let's talk about the steps that are carried out in order to prepare the secondary distribution summary. So first step is that you will have to analyze the departments of your organization. Okay? So let's say you have 10 departments in an organization. You have to identify how many of them are production, how many of them are service in nature. This classification is a very important step. The reason being, what you have to remember here is that it is only the production departments who have the capability to generate the revenue, which means whatever cost that has been hit as a result of this, end of the day, it has to be diverted back to these departments. Okay? So the reason why this step is very important is because whatever costs that are incurred as a result of your overhead, it can be absorbed only by the production departments. So this classification is very important because you have to differentiate and see which of the departments in your organization, they have the capability to generate revenue, they have the capability to absorb the overheads. So classification into production and service department, this is a very important step because the determination as to who would be bearing the cost is decided on the basis of this classification. So whatever cost that gets diverted, whatever cost that gets assigned to the service department, please remember that in turn has to come back to the production department. So if you make a mistake in this classification, it could so happen that your distribution of overhead and then charging it back to the cost unit may not happen in an appropriate way. So for example, a service department, by mistake, you classify that as a production department. But what can happen is a service department, since they do not have the capability to generate revenue, they may not be able to absorb the revenue. Okay? They would not be able to absorb the overhead. So that could be a problem. Okay? This could affect your cost distribution of your organization. So your departments, it gets classified into production and service department based on the fact whether they're generating revenue or not generating revenue. Okay. Now, step 2 is that you would prepare the overhead distribution summary. Okay. The second step is that you would prepare the overhead distribution summary. So basically over here, what happens is you're carrying out the primary distribution summary. Okay. You're preparing the primary distribution summary. You're classifying the overheads among all the departments, irrespective of the fact whether they are production or they are service in nature. So here what would happen is you would end up distributing the overheads between the departments, irrespective of the fact that whether they're production in nature or whether they're service in nature. So as a part of your preparation of your primary distribution summary, what would happen is you're distributing your overhead among the departments irrespective of whether they're production or whether they're service. That doesn't matter at this point of time because you're just bifurcating the cost among the different departments. You have 15 departments, your overhead is distributed among the 15 departments based on the extent to which they enjoy the benefit. You have 220 departments, you're distributing your overhead among all the 220 departments based on the extent to which they are enjoying the benefit. Step 3, what would happen is secondary distribution summary is prepared. Now here, why are you preparing the secondary distribution summary? Secondary distribution summary is prepared here so that whatever cost that got assigned to the service department, it gets reapportioned back. So as a part of your second step, you have divided the overheads among the departments whatever overhead that has been assigned to the service department, it has to be now passed back to the production department. So step 3, you will be preparing the secondary distribution summary to reapportion the cost that has gone to the service department to the production department. So that is what is happening as a part of step 3. So these are the 3 steps that we are following. So why we are doing all this is because whatever cost that has been allocated to the service department, it has to go back to the production department. Okay, whatever cost has gone to the service department, it has to go back to the production department. So that's the reason why we go about with the preparation of secondary distribution summary. Okay, that's the reason why we go about with this preparation. So I hope this is clear to all of you. Secondary distribution summary, the steps, there are 3 important steps. Step 1, classification of departments into production and then service. Step 2, you're preparing the primary overhead distribution summary. Step 3, you're preparing the secondary distribution summary so that you can reapportion the costs. So these are the 3 steps that are carried out. Now we are talking about reapportionment of the service department overheads. Okay, now we are talking about the reapportionment of the service department overheads. So what are the different methods that are available to reapportion the service department overheads to production departments? So we have different scenarios. I will try and cover all the scenarios here, but for your understanding, I've displayed a flow chart over here for you to understand how exactly will we go about with the scheme of distribution of overheads of the service departments to the different production departments. Okay, here what we are carrying out is we are carrying out the distribution of the distribution of these overheads among the different departments. How do we go about distributing that? Okay, so that is what we are discussing over here. So we will pick up on each of these on one by one, and then we shall have a discussion. Okay, so the first scenario is where we have to apportion all the service departments overheads to production departments overheads. Okay, so here we are talking about a scenario where overhead costs are charged to production department's overhead costs. Now, one important thing that you have to remember is this scenario can be applied only when the services of the service departments are utilized only by production departments. Okay? So whatever services, whatever offerings that are rendered by the service department, it is utilized exclusively by production departments only. No other departments are involved over here. So let's say you have finance department in your organization. The services of the finance department are utilized only by the operations department. No other departments are taking inputs, or they are taking the help of the production department. So here what will happen is the entire cost, of the service departments, it will get reapportioned to the production department. But please remember, this scenario can be applied only in the context where the services of the production department, the services of the service department is utilized only by the production department. This can be applied only in the scenario, only in the context where the services of the service department, it is utilized only by the production department. So this is when we can apply this step. Okay, so this methodology can be carried out only in the scenario where the services of the service department is utilized only by the production department. Second scenario that we have is where we have to apportion to production as well as service departments. So we will carry out this methodology when the services of service department is utilized by other service departments and production departments. Okay? So this methodology is used by where the services of service department is utilized by other service departments also. So let me talk about this with an example. So let's talk about a real life scenario. Okay, the real life scenario of real life scenario. Let's say in an organization, you have production department, and the production department is your operations department. Okay, so it is your operations department. Okay. So in your business, you have a production department, and the production department that you have is your operations department. Okay. Now we'll also talk about some service departments. Okay. We'll also talk about some service departments. So some service departments that we can have, let's say HR department, finance department, okay, facilities department. Okay, so these are some of the service departments that you can have in your organization. Okay, these are some of the service departments that you can have in your organization. So here, what has happened here is that you have production department, and then you have a production department which is only your operations department. You have only one department which is your operations department, and then service departments you have three. Let's say one, we picked up the example of HR, then we picked up the example of finance, and then we picked up the example of facilities department. Okay, so let's say HR department, they are responsible for recruitment. Okay, now in any organization, this HR department will recruit for operations. Okay, they'll be carrying out recruitments for operations. Okay, they will be carrying out recruitment for operations, and they will also be carrying out recruitment for other departments also. So for example, finance, there was a vacancy, so they decide to carry out recruitment for finance department also. So the services of one service department, it is utilized by other service departments also. So here what is happening is the services of HR department, this is being utilized by other service departments also. Okay, so here what is happening is the services of one service department, it is utilized by operations as well as other service departments as well. So in this case, we cannot go with the first methodology that I had shared with you. We will have to go with the second methodology of passing the services to other service departments. Okay, so this is the place where we will be apportioning to production and service departments. So service department cost is apportioned to other service departments, and it must be reapportioned back to the production departments. Okay, so here what happens is the benefit of one service department is utilized by other service department. So that cost also in turn has to be repassed back to the production department. Now, for you to carry out this, there are two ways that you can do it. One is reciprocal method, and the other is non-reciprocal method. So reciprocal and non-reciprocal methods, these are basically methodologies that are used in distribution of overheads in the secondary distribution summary. Now, I'll just quickly touch upon non-reciprocal and reciprocal. Non-reciprocal method, this is also called as the step ladder method. Okay? Non-reciprocal method, this is also called as the step ladder method. Step ladder method is utilized where the service departments are not mutually interdependent. What does that mean? So let's say you have two service departments, service department X, service department Y. So X and Y, they do not, X takes services from Y, but Y does not take any services from X. Okay? X takes services from Y, but Y does not take any services from X. So here there is no mutual interdependence between the departments. So here X provides services to department Y, but X does not depend on department Y for any kind of services. So this is what is called as non-reciprocal. So I can give you one best example for this. We can think of the example of cafeteria. Okay? We can think of the example of cafeteria in an organization. So cafeteria is a service department. They would be providing food for both let's say production as well as service departments. Okay? But cafeteria will not take the services of marketing department. They do not need the benefits of marketing department. So this is the scenario where we would be applying non-reciprocal. Then you have reciprocal. So reciprocal method is the methodology that you will be applying when the service departments are mutually interdependent. Here what will happen is the departments here are mutually interdependent. So department X is providing a service to department Y is also providing a service to department X. So service department X and Y, they are mutually interdependent and they depend on each other for services. So this is the scenario where we would be applying reciprocal method. Okay, this is the scenario where we would be utilizing reciprocal method. Okay, so here there are two methodologies that you can follow. You have simultaneous equation method and then you have repeated distribution method. So basically what you have to remember is these are approaches which are followed in terms of distribution of the overheads when you prepare, after you have prepared your primary, when you're working out your secondary distribution summary. So a quick recap of what we have quickly done. We were talking about preparation of secondary distribution summary. I explained to you that service department overhead, it has to be reapportioned back to the production department. You have multiple scenarios. First scenario is where the entire overhead is apportioned to the production department. So here, what happens is whatever overheads that are incurred by the service departments, it is passed directly back to the production department. But one important clause that you have to remember here is that this can be utilized only in the context where the services of the service department, it is utilized only by production department. Then you have apportionment to production as well as service department. So this we will apply where the services of service department, it is utilized by operations as well as service departments. Okay, it is utilized both by production as well as service departments. Then we have two methods, reciprocal, non-reciprocal. Non-reciprocal method is used when the departments are mutually, they are not mutually interdependent. Okay, so this is also called a step ladder method. Then you have reciprocal. Reciprocal method is applied when the departments are mutually interdependent, and to carry out as a part of reciprocal method, you have two steps. You have simultaneous and then you have repeated distribution method. So this is how you would go about with the preparation of secondary distribution summary.